Good morning, friends. It is cold this morning. My thermometer read 3 degrees below zero on my front porch. That's cold. Western Tennessee, that's unusual. But I can survive a little chill in the home if it's the physical cold. But the spiritual cold, the lack of fellowship, that's tough. That'll freeze you out on the inside. My wife and I, when we first got married, we didn't really understand that God designed that there be a depth of love and intimacy in the marriage that you don't find anywhere else. In Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." I didn't know anything about the love of God for His church. It took me a long time to begin to scratch the surface on that subject, but I thank God that He's teaching us. When He called me away from the beer bottle, when Darlene was trying to make changes in her dress, that was the beginning of many, many changes. But when the outside changes, it's the result of an inward change in the heart. Now, the heart is where we speak the language of heaven. People say, well, what language will we speak in heaven? Well, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1, "Though I speak with the tongues of angels and of men, and have not charity, have not love." Love is the language of heaven. If you don't have that, you become as a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. In verse 8, it says, "Love never faileth." That's an unfailing language that comes from your heart to the heart of the ones you love. And so we didn't have that. Our conversation, it was on things like, dress and sports and concerts and sex and drugs and things like that. We weren't converted. Our hearts weren't changed. We didn't have the relationship God designed, and He wanted to help us to get it. Luke 6:45, "Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." So when the heart changes, the conversation changes. So Darlene and we began to talk about different things. It was slow, it was subtle, but it was sure. So we would talk about, not so much about sports and drugs and that kind of thing anymore, but the importance of having good nutrition, the importance of turning away from the alcohol and drugs because of what it does to the relationship. Darlene's telling me how important it is that she changed the way she dressed. And that was the beginning of a different kind of dialogue. And, as I go back and think about some of the things that she said to me, just unforgettable jewels of compassion that I've never forgotten. Just one example, when the Lord got us on a different kind of track, He was changing the way we think, changing our mindset. And that verse in Romans 12, verse 2, "Be ye not conformed to this world." Conformity means that you conform to a chair when you sit down, you conform to a bed when you lay down. But it says in Romans 12, 2, "Be ye not conformed to this world." And that's how we were. My wife and I were a very worldly, secular couple. "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." So He was trying to give us new hearts. And it wasn't an easy process for the Lord to try to change hard-hearted people like Darlene and me. But He's very persistent, He's very patient. And as the outside began to change, of course it's the heart change that comes first. So the Lord is starting that work in our hearts, continuing that work in our hearts. Even today, we're not done yet. Hebrews 12, verse 2, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith." I'm not claiming to be any done deal yet, but I'm trying. I say, "Lord, have mercy and help me today." And so I'd gotten into some criminal things too, and when that was put behind us, I was broke. Darlene and I didn't have much money. She got pregnant, and I thought I needed to get a job with a better salary, and so I did. I got a job as a reporter in a newspaper in a nearby town. Went to work my first day, had my assignment, went to write a story on an organization. I don't need to say more, but it was one of the most difficult days of my life. Very stressful, some of the things that happened that day. And at the end of the day, when I got home from work, My wife and I now had adopted the habit of praying together before we go to sleep. At night we would talk for a few minutes, pray, and go to bed. And at night as we were talking, Darlene asked me, how'd the day go and everything, and I told her, I said, I don't want to talk about it. She said, well, how did it go today? I said, I'd rather not talk about it. It was a bad day. And so we talked about it for a few minutes, and then she looked at me and she said, Lou, don't go back. I said, what? She said, don't go back. And I said, I have to go back. We're broke, you're pregnant, we need the money. She said, in the morning I want you to get up, go down to that paper office and quit. And I said, that's impossible, we need the money. And she said to me, a different song in the heart placed there by God. She said, I care more about you than I care about money. And my dear friends, that was music to my ears. Wouldn't that be music to yours too? In the Bible, you may read the story of someone that sells out. Judas sold out Christ for 30 pieces of silver. Delilah sold out Samson for 1,000 pieces of silver. But to find a man or a woman that will not be bought and will not be sold, this is true as the needle to the pole. This is what my wife is saying. The conversation, the whole dialogue is changing. At that point, we've been married, 11, 12 years. 13 years, but the Lord was changing everything. And with the changes on the outside, they were preceded by a change on the inside. And out of the abundance of the heart, 6:45 of Luke, I'll quote it again, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I was very thankful and very glad for how God was leading in my life. And it was challenging, it was a struggle, but dear friends, it's worth it. I saw the fruit of a life in Christ as I lived my life in my home, in my marriage, my friends, everywhere. Everything began to change. And so what had been a life of misery, maybe at the time I wouldn't have called it that, a life of just misery and drudgery and disappointment and discouragement. Now it was one where I had a measure of peace. And the more I got, the more I wanted. And the Lord has a full supply. His grace is sufficient. It says 2 Peter 3:18, grow in grace. There's always grace for growth. So my dear friends, if you're trying to grow in grace today, if you're meeting with a trial or a struggle or some tribulation, look up. You've got a friend in heaven who wants to help you across the difficult places, give you a peace that passes understanding. That's Philippians 4:7. And He wants to renew relationships. So if you had some challenges in the home, your parents, your children, your friends, your co-workers, your fellow students, He wants to renew relationships. Give us a new heart and a new life. So may the Lord help you today, friends, to be hidden in Christ. And may your heart continually be changing. And as the heart changes, the life will change. May God grant you that blessing today. Stay warm, friends.
There shall be showers of blessing. This is the promise of God. There shall be seasons refreshing, sent from the Savior above.